Hi, I'm Shannon Buckley, and I'm currently an instructional designer at the Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine. I also am an adjunct professor of business at Southern New Hampshire University.
Okay, so Shannon, thank you. I know we actually met through SNHU. I was one
Yes,
of your students in a marketing class. Right? It was a wonderful
Ben,
class, and
he totally failed.
uh,
No, I'm just kidding.
it was rough. And I figured after my C minus showing that you should have you on and help me out a little bit more.
Yes, Ben
So,
was one of the great students, and his papers were excellent, and he definitely shows his business and marketing acumen very well. So.
I appreciate that, and for you too, great style of teaching, great engagement, far above and beyond than what you see for most online teachers. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, and thanks for joining me. So first, I want to jump back here in instructional. What was the other thing that you were saying you
That's
do?
a it's so hard to explain. Instructional designer, it's still
Okay,
misunderstood. So I help faculty build courses, and I'm also a teacher. So I think it helps me. I kind of gets intertwined there. So
so when you're helping build courses, are you writing the material and then you're
mm,
taking it, and then you obviously have a video company as well. Are you taking
yes.
video as well and
So
making video into the courses, or how much? This has to be more than just like a simple here's the course. Seems a little bit more complex.
so when we're working with faculty members, instructional designers do several things. We typically what our instructional designers do is we follow the ADDIE model. So we look at the content, we design, we develop it, we implement the content, and then we analyze after. So it's basically a cyclical model in nature. And the faculty are pretty much the subject matter experts. So again, I work for a school of medicine. I have no idea. I'm not of a science background. I'm not of a medical background. I have no idea I mean, the last time I heard cytoskeleton was in like biology in high school for like a cell. So I don't know what that is. The faculty pretty much write the content. And what an instructional designer does is they take that content and they develop it in a way that's best for student learning. So it's usually faculty want to write like textbook material. It's very heavy, it's very dense. So the job of an instructional designer is to consider what the student needs. And when we're talking medical students, they're going to have to go through a lot of material. But can a concept that's very difficult to understand be a video?
Hmm.
Can it have an animation associated with it? Can it have an activity to reinforce that learning and make sure that learning happens with that concept? So, if you could think of an online course that's littered with text, that's not the best for learning at all. No
Yeah.
one wants to do that. Nobody wants to. The best courses really are short, sweet, to the point. They promote learning, they promote engagement, maybe a little media here and there. So that's pretty
Hmm.
much what I do is I look at that really dense content and try to, figure out the best way to display it for the student.
You brought up another interesting point, I think, with going through that process. So if you have someone who knew everything about medical, like a doctor
Yeah.
or someone who is really into medicine, they would have a hard time relaying that in a simple way sometimes. And I see that in technology myself, having an engineering and IT
Mm.
background. Sometimes engineers who are so into it have a hard time relaying that in a simple and simplistic way. And by having you go in and say, hey, can I make a video that is
Mhm.
understandable? Because if it's understandable to you, right, with your back, I mean, you have a definitely an
Mhm.
educated background, but if you can make sense out of it, then you know that you're able to make sense of it to other people. Does that make sense?
Right. So I always say if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand the material. So, and
Yeah.
some people are afraid, some people kind of are taken aback when I say that. It's not that I'm insulting your intelligence. Doctors, lawyers, anyone who I'm working with. It's not that I know you're intelligent and I know you've worked hard and I know
Hmm.
you know the jargon and I know you know the terminology, but just say it to me as if we're just two people talking
Yep.
and I don't understand what something is. So, like I said, an instructional designer, oh, I could say this and this, and I could talk about all these theories. I build courses.
Yep.
And that's what I say to people. And they're like, "Oh, okay, okay, I
Yeah.
understand. I know that." So
You
that's what I try to get the faculty that I'm working with to do.
Yeah, I know myself having led engineering teams and been an engineer myself. I know that's something that I always just push on is look, relay it to someone again, like a 5 year old, relay it to someone
Hmm.
at their level and understand what their level is first. So get to know
Hmm.
them, have a conversation, figure
Yes.
out who your audience is. And you hear that all the time where engineers, they'll go in and they'll just have this conversation with the CEOs, even sometimes CIOs, CTOs, and they're talking at such a high level, they just lose their audience. And
Yeah.
I've always said, and I laugh at myself when I say this because I say EQ over IQ. And it might
Yes.
be because I have a higher EQ than IQ. So I'm like, hey, I'm really good with this. So I'm going to go with it. But it is
Yes.
important in business, that EQ portion. Is that something I think in marketing, it's probably a relevant aspect as well?
I think EQ is relevant today more than, I mean, it's always been relevant, but it's starting to be talked about more and more. And I just recently, my boss actually did a conference talk on emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
They're actually teaching EQ, and EQ is actually part of our medical school curriculum. So for an example, doctors today, they're so burnt out. They're not connected to the patient. They're typing their notes. They're like, what's wrong with you? I don't
Hmm.
have time. And they're saying, stop.
Right.
This- Understanding that this patient is going through something,
Yep.
understanding that they're scared. They don't understand the terminology that you're talking about. So actually teaching doctors now to sit down, calm down, and say things in just a personal way
Yeah.
that reaches their patient so that their patient understands. I mean, I can't think of how many times I went to the doctor leaving like, what did he say? I was just like, what did she say? And I'm reading my chart like,
Right.
I don't know what this blood work means. I don't know. So we're actually now teaching medical students that EQ is so there's like I think two whole courses on it where they need to do a project and they actually practice in clinical
Yeah.
that skill, that personal skill, because it's so lost. And I think that's important in marketing. And I think it's important, it's obviously just super important in business. And what we're seeing now is that skill is kind of overtaking those hard skills. You can
Yep.
know how to do something, you can know how to build something, you can know how to develop something. But if you can't talk to people
Yep.
or understand what they're feeling at that moment, it's kind of like, is it really beneficial for a team and for a business if you're not getting that, especially for leadership? Leadership is huge. I've had so many bosses who their EQ is just like non-existent.
Right.
just they just did not
Yeah.
understand their team, their personalities, and they didn't adapt to specific teammates and how they work. So I think that EQ is like a whole realm that I think is important right now, but it's always been important,
Yeah.
and I think we're realizing it
We're
how just
starting to
how important
realize
it is.
it. And
Yeah.
medicine is always interesting when it comes to EQ because you think, okay, well, I need to connect with a patient. But then when you're in an industry or where you're helping people heal and you're seeing a lot of, I guess, sadness, and you get
Mhm.
that, where the healthcare workers can take that on themselves
Yeah.
and have that. And so I think sometimes healthcare workers are like, they just put up this wall so that if
Yeah.
someone dies, someone goes through something tragic, they don't have to feel that pain. But then part of EQ is your self-care and how you take care of
Mhm.
yourself and going beyond that. So I think, and I'm sure they're teaching that, but I hope part of that is like, hey, let's teach you how to connect, but also not how to take on their problems as a burden. I think
Right.
that's probably something that is very probably more difficult, obviously, than marketing, where you're like, that's not
Yeah.
as difficult.
I think, yeah, and what comes into that is the whole mental health discussion
Yep.
in society right now is especially for doctors, are they getting the resources that they need from
Yep.
dealing with hearing these patient stories, dealing with death? Are they internalizing it, or are they actually going to the counseling services available to just get that out
Yep.
and to, take care of themselves? Yeah, it's a huge discussion and play right now in medical school curriculum, at least what we're doing. But I think it's definitely being taught. at other schools.
For sure. There's an interesting tie-in to AI. And I think when you look at AI, as we talk about that, and as I start exploring it, I mean, there's philosophical, there's psychological, there's so many different things. But one thing that I think is interesting that they're finding are the programmers. So your old school programmers that are really data-driven programmers in their mind, the X's and O's, ones and
Mm.
zeros, they're actually having a hard time with the which portion of programming because AI is supposed to be human-like. And what they're
Yes.
finding is like linguists and people who understand language, and again, people with higher IQs are making more, or I guess not more, but better flows when it comes to
Hmm.
AI, if you want to call it chatbots or AI automation, or especially the AI integration with humanity. It is interesting that that EQ is starting to pay off with even programming into AI.
Yes, I can't remember where I saw it. I could probably look it up where I think it was a TED Talk where this person was saying coding and programming the old way, the way that we know it might not exist once AI comes to full fruition. AI might be able to write itself from just from learning the models that we provide it. And now coding and programming languages and the way that that's taught in education needs to change. I mean, it's AI is just this massive societal shift, just as the internet was, I say.
Yeah.
And when I get into education, I mean, everyone in education, when the internet came out, online learning came out, they said, this is the end. This is the end of traditional teaching. And it
Yeah.
was very fear-based and
Yeah.
misunderstood. And that's exactly what's happening with AI. It's fear-based,
100%.
it's misunderstood. And it's just how we see the internet just take off and change society. That's AI is just the next iteration of that.
It really is. And you look back, I don't know, I've thought about this a lot in different technologies and thinking about the fear of technologies. I mean, even the car, the automobile, right? Everyone
Hmm.
was like, I'm not giving up my horse. Like, my horse is
Yep.
just fine. And so they're all happy with the horse. But I remember in high school, if I used a calculator, it was lazy. I was being an idiot. Like, why are you
Mm.
using a calculator? Don't use a calculator. Now, of course, my college education started much later. So when I turned 40, I decided, hey, I'm going to finally go to college. I take a statistics class and I'm encouraged to not just use a calculator, but to use an Excel, plug in
Yep.
the formulas. Now you still have to understand what formulas and how to manipulate a spreadsheet. And that's why I always say, like, look, I can use a calculator, but a mathematician can, like, someone who really knows math can do all those symbols that I'm like, I don't know what that does.
Yeah.
Like they can really manipulate a calculator. And I think a lot with AI, and especially if you look at GPT models and generative models, people can use it, but the people who understand language and understand how to talk to it and understand how
Mm.
to, again, manipulate it are going to be the ones that get more out of it. And I think the
Yes.
education conversation is really interesting because education is going to figure out how to not resist AI and how to start teaching, if you want to call it ethical and responsible
Mhm.
usage of AI. And if you look at like even like you can use Grammarly, you can use so many things,
Mhm.
or even GPT to edit we talk about posts or what you write to make sure it's good. But the universities need to embrace it first before
Yes.
right now it's just rampant. And you can see when people write, like just using AI without any human in, I'm sure you do as a teacher, right?
So what ChatGPT is, and I in my so I'm actually going for my doctorate at Wilkes University, and AI and education is probably the biggest topic
Yeah, I can
that we
imagine.
are talking about right now as teachers, as administrators, as educational leaders, AI, AI, AI. It's good. It's good that we're talking about it because the next portion of leaders that come out of this will understand it better, see how it works, see how to embrace it, what's its advantages, what's its implications, all that kind of good stuff. Well, so I'll begin with Chat GPT. It's when not just Chat GPT, but when AI writes something, they are writing it as an average person or average human,
Right.
not necessarily in that person's writing style. However,
Right.
now there's models where you could actually put
Sure.
samples in of your writing style and it makes it's crazy. But when a student wants, they say, I want a paper on the mitochondria of a cell, its function, and how it works within the body. It's going to produce something, and it's very, when I read some of these things, it's bland. It's kind of
Yeah.
like it just grabs a bunch of sources, puts them together in a way where it sounds like the average human.
Right.
And when I read it compared to a student's other work, I can tell, teachers can tell
Yep.
that it's not their work.
Yep.
However, I recently did a paper in my instructional design class for my doctorate where can teachers detect AI, and it's actually writing in somewhat like a senior or master's level way. So
Mhm.
if a freshman student is using this, it's
Yep.
actually, you can tell.
Yeah.
But if a master's student is using it, it's actually a little bit harder. So it's
Correct.
interesting.
It's a good
Um,
technical writer. AI is
yeah.
very good at technical writing, but then I think we also need to define what is the boundary of writing with AI as well, and using AI again, like Grammarly. Like if I'm using my thought and I write it out with my thought, but hey, I want to make sure to clean up my
Mhm.
spelling and my grammar and sentence flow and sentence structure. I think, I mean, that's something that we've been doing since using Word and autocorrect in
Yes.
Word, right? It's not like we write a
Yes.
document and if we use autocorrect, they're like, hey, you're using, which is a machine learning function.
Hmm.
Autocorrect is a machine learning
Hmm.
function. You're using machine learning. We're encouraged to use those kind of things for grammar. But like you said, if you go in and it's not your thought and you're just, hey, write this article for me
Hmm.
or write this essay for me, first of all, you can tell because it's going to use a lot of, what do you call it? Like examples, like
It
what's the
it
words?
it actually uses a lot of terminology, definitions, and like jargon
Yeah,
from
jargon.
papers. So you
Yeah,
can, like I said, you could, a high school student using it, a teacher could tell. But actually, if a medical student was using it, it actually might be a little harder to tell if it's, simply a paper written based on, what's the function of this and what's the terms for that. It raises the question though, are when an instructor requires an assignment, write a paper on X or write a paper on Y, is it really, encouraging that learning to take place?
right.
I'm just copying and pasting something, or I always push for assessments to be more personalized, more like a case study, more to where they can't enter a prompt
Yeah,
into chat gpt. So let's just say, I'll give a very brief example, that you're a clinician and you're seeing this patient. We give an overview of a very detailed information of a patient. What would you do?
yeah,
And there could be several different answers of what you would do. That's something that AI can't answer. It can help with. You could go to ChatGPT and look up symptoms that the patient's having. You could look up treatment for the patient, but ultimately it's the student's job to formulate that critical thinking
yeah.
and formulate that answer. So that's what I always try to push is are the assessments that we're using, they're out, I think they're outdated, and they're not really encouraging that deeper learning.
Yeah.
So as an instructional designer, I always try to help faculty in that way and think of assignments that, are more personalized
Yep.
and not
And
just like, oh, define
100%.
what this is.
And yeah, I think I mean, when I was a kid, neurodiversity and all that wasn't even talked about, right? I probably had severe ADHD and was
Oh,
just out of
yeah.
control, and that's how it is. And I thought, and I'll jump into like why I think we need to keep exploring different styles of learning for different people. So I
Mm-hmm.
grew up really thinking I was stupid. Like that's the way I thought. I was a barely a B student, and I only kept that so I could play sports. And
Mm-hmm.
then I went to take my ACT so I could play soccer,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a 16 on my ACT. And that's not a good score.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically failing an ACT. And I don't know how you do it, but I sure did. And so I thought, like, I'm dumb. Like I didn't think I could do
Mm-hmm.
anything. I didn't think
Yeah.
I could do computers or
Right.
technology or anything like that from an education standpoint. And that's why I put off going to college, because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not smart enough to go to college. And then I saw an ad like in the paper one morning about people making a lot of money on computers and working on
Mhm.
their MCSE. And I was working at a Denny's and I was like, well, I want to make a lot of money, but I've never earned a computer. And so I signed up for classes thinking I can make it work. And the classes were horrible. I got actually
Mm.
bullied by the computer nerds, like in that school, like they would turn off
That's
my
the
computer.
worst.
It was horrible. And so I got bullied by the computer nerds in this, like, it was like a trade school thing. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, come build, like, here, I know you want to do this during the summer, just come build some computers we need for my work. And what I learned was I was a hands-on learner. And
Mm.
I learned that very early, is that I can read through pages and pages and documents and I don't learn. But if I actually have to do something and I start working through it, doing it myself, I'm I'm great at it. I mean, and I'd even say like our final, like for marketing, is a great example of that. Is we could go through a lot of the marketing terminology and it was at the 4 Ps or 5 Ps, or I still
There's
remember.
like there's like
There's so
16
many.
P's now. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
so many out there, and I still understand some of it and I retain some of it,
Mhm.
but putting something into like real life and
Yes.
saying like, okay, how does this flow from a like doing a marketing design for a business, and then using, like I used for the persona, I used my wife, right? So it's easy to
Yeah.
say this is who this is who it is, and like this, and so I used someone I knew and something I knew, but again, it was hands on, and I think we have so many we have this old style, like you said, this old style of learning and how we have to learn. But AI, I think, can be used to if it's used correctly, it can be used to help people with neurodiversity and with different learning styles.
Absolutely. I think it could help teachers generate ideas for every type of student. I think right now, AI as an idea generator is amazing,
Hmm.
as a brainstorming tool is amazing because
Yes.
we sometimes just think in our own little box and think about what we know. And I'm I'll even say I'm really not good at idea generation. I can take an idea and transform it and into something creative. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really not good at creatively thinking about ideas or about content creation. But AI has helped me, you know, it gives me a list of here's a bunch of ideas. Ooh, I'm
Yeah.
going to take that one and I'm going to make it into something. It's been awesome. So I think teachers with their students, creating some different kinds of assignments or ones that really haven't been used or some kind of experimental is or assignments to do is awesome. I think it should be used. And I think students should use it for brainstorming ideas on a science project. Why not? It's not that the AI is completing their science project. It's
Right.
just I need ideas. What's the difference than looking in a book for different science projects? So, you
Yeah, I
know.
love that. I like that a lot. Like the
Mhm.
brainstorm, I do that a lot with, and that's
Yeah.
probably primarily how I use AI, even for my
Yeah.
business, is
Yeah.
just like, I've got this idea, but I need a little expansion on it, or
Yes.
I need to see, is it being done right now?
Hmm.
Another thing I also like asking AI, because AI is programmed, especially GPT is programmed to be affirmative to you. So
Hmm.
always agree with you. Is
Yes.
I always like asking it, well, what's wrong with this? Like, what's wrong with my thinking? And it actually will come up with some good ideas and some good
Yeah.
reasons why, well, you didn't really think about X, Y, or Z, and you need
Hmm.
to probably add this or think about this. You
Yeah.
take some of it you don't. So I had a question. So I started, like I said, my college career started in my 40s. I was just like, okay, I'm going to do it now. And I'm getting a psychology degree. I don't know if I'll do anything with it, but it has been interesting. I just wanted
Yeah.
to do it and learn. What was yours? Was yours right after school, like high school, and you jumped right into college, or what has your path been?
Yeah, so I went for my bachelor's. I have a bachelor's in communication arts and digital media, and I thought I was going to go to New York and LA and be a filmmaker.
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
like, but what I really became, and this is the beauty of a liberal arts education, and I'm going to say this, is it expanded my knowledge on different areas. So I
Mhm.
was able to take a science class, I was able to take a business class, a marketing class, and that's where I learned, ooh, I can combine my digital media skill with business and with marketing
Yeah.
and kind of enter that. So when I got out of school, I worked in IT, but I was a web designer, and web
Okay.
design in that time. was just shifting to marketing, or everyone like in higher
Sure.
education, they were making the shift. So I was a web designer. I was also a web designer for a corporate in a corporate setting. I didn't like the corporate field. It wasn't fulfilling to me. I really enjoyed student interaction and working in higher ed. So I pretty much, jumped out of corporate really, really quick, dipped my toes in the water, went back to higher ed. And I then transferred into the marketing department within higher ed, and then got into instructional design and teaching. I realized I really like teaching marketing. I really like teaching video. I really like making videos that help people learn. So I have a bunch of YouTube tutorials on how to
Yeah.
use Adobe software. It was like kind of over the years just finding like these combinations of what I like to do,
Hmm.
and my experience has led me to where I am, and it ultimately led me to wanting to earn my doctorate and teach because
Yeah.
academia, you need there. I have all the experience, I run my own business, but oh, you need the letters at the end of your name. It's just kind of
Sure.
like that thing now.
So
But
you're teaching right now, though. I mean, you're
yes,
teaching at actually a couple different places. So what's the doctorate going to do for you
the
that a
doctorate,
master's isn't?
yeah, the doctorate, it's really, what do I want to say? It's kind of like that thing where it's like, oh, you can't be assistant or associate professor. You could only be a visiting
Oh,
professor or an adjunct if you don't have the credential. So the credential pretty much opens the door to being a full-time professor.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So throughout this transformation and your evolution of going like teaching, getting a master's degree, being in IT, like, dipping your toes into IT,
Mm,
web design, you've been around a lot of technology.
yeah.
And obviously you've experienced a lot of technological changes and advancements aside from AI. So putting AI
Mhm.
aside, what do you think's been one of the biggest influences from a technology standpoint? I guess maybe the internet. I don't know. Like what's like that you've seen that's really
Mm,
changed the game.
let me think. I really, and from a work and a business standpoint, I absolutely love, like, this is going to sound boring to people, but I really love project management tools like Asana or ClickUp, or
Okay.
like people use Slack too, but anything like that allows you to chat and track progress,
Yeah.
and like, because AI kind of goes into that where it's helping now actually meet deadlines and track a budget
Yep.
and everything. But I just loved using different project management software to keep me, that's how my mind has to work
Yeah.
to keep me on course. I need to see the progress of something. I need to see it develop over time for me to feel like I've actually succeeded at something. So like, I use Asana for my business, and just keeping track of client information. Dashboards are really, really neat. So I love like those interactive, intuitive pieces
Yeah.
of technology. So I'm a visual person.
Yep.
That's why I like video. Seeing my progress, seeing the dashboard, seeing how many clients, seeing what's next. I really, really appreciate technology in that space. Because if I had to just work on paper, then I just have post-it notes all over my wall of like
Yep.
how everything's being tracked.
Right.
So,
Or the world of spreadsheets.
yeah,
You would
yeah.
use
I mean,
Excel spreadsheets, right?
I still use Excel. I use Excel often. I still use spreadsheets for like things and doing quick formulas on everything, and, tracking things there. But yeah, the nice visual display of information is amazing.
Yeah.
So I have to
That
say that's one thing that I appreciate technology for.
that's a great answer. You don't think you take it so much for granted that all
Yeah,
the stuff that, like you
it
said, like
keeps me on
ClickUp and all
track. It
that.
keeps me sane. So,
That's awesome. Okay, so now I want to jump into more of a philosophical conversation about AI.
sure.
It's something I think about. It's always on my mind that we're always worried about machines taking over humans.
Yeah.
And obviously we talk about EQ, right? How is a machine going to get
Mm-hmm.
the EQ? How is AI going to
Mm-hmm.
get EQ? I'm not saying it can't happen, and maybe someday it will, but we never talk, or it's rarely talked about humans catching up with AI from an intelligence standpoint. And obviously, when you say, well, how is that going to happen? So Elon Musk came out with the Neuralink, right? Which is
Yeah.
now helping people. who are paralyzed be able to move and control like thought.
Yeah.
But his overall idea is to then be able to eventually make us superhumans, right? Like that we'll be able to be more
Yeah.
intelligent. Now, if you could put a chip in your head that let you speak every single language in the world, that let you digest every piece of information, and it was safe, would you do it? Like, would you want to keep up with machines from an intelligence standpoint?
This is my husband and I talk he's really into this as well, Neuralink and being chipped, and that's everyone has their own opinion on it. I think it's incredibly interesting if we could be a society that no we wouldn't have to work as hard at the grunt work, and maybe we'd eventually be a society where we get to do our own creative endeavors.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we would get to, do the self-care more than working the 40-hour work week
Yep.
that's so antiquated. Maybe we could do the things that humans were meant to do more than the task oriented stuff. I personally love if AI could do like my chores for me, like the
Right.
dishes and the laundry. I mean, I'm all about the 1950s smart house where like it has the refrigerator has everything and it makes a
Right.
shopping list for you when it gets empty. I mean, where is that? Like
Uh,
that even had like the smart house of the 1950s realm. It's like
right.
I don't know where it got lost.
The Jetsons.
Um
Yeah.
yeah, but the Neuralink, it's amazing. It's like again, it's like that sci-fi idea.
Mm-hmm.
I it's I don't me personally, I don't think I'm ready for that
Mm.
just because of how I was brought up, and I think future generations will be ready for that.
Yeah.
And it might not be something for me. It definitely would be something as humans evolve and I mean, when I have children, they're going to be introduced to AI right away,
Right.
and technology right away, so they're going to be used to that. And I guess it's just something generational where you have to be born into it. It's
Yeah.
quite amazing, and I think that's probably where the world is headed. It's a little bit scary that it would know your thoughts. Legal implications come into it, like policy and regulations. How is it going to be regulated? What's going to be available? I mean, it's going to be
Yeah.
a crazy, crazy conversations, but I don't want that to limit the ability of what it can do.
Right.
So, but
Yeah.
it's just some things to think about.
I think, I mean, my biggest concern, having a little bit of a cybersecurity background, is like the ability for someone to hack my brain, like literally
Yeah.
hack my brain. That's my biggest fear. But then whenever I get asked, like, if you had one superpower that you could have, it's always been, I'd love to speak every single language in the world. Like, that's not be stronger, not fly, not be
Yeah.
invisible, all this stuff. I'd love to do that. It would be that would be a tough one for me to turn down if they're like, look, you can have this, but well, I guess you'd have to look at the implications, but you could speak every single language in the world. I'm like, well, maybe someone could hack me, but I can speak every language in the world. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely you mentioned cybersecurity of it. I mean,
yeah.
there's ethical implications for AI. I mean, we have the dark and the deep web still on the
Hmm.
internet that things happen with. So it's a crazy, crazy conversation, and things that need to be done. I think first, I personally, I think with Neuralink, I don't think humans right now are ready for that, at
Right.
least the majority. I definitely think with diffusion of innovation, it goes for everything. I think early adopters, yes, there will always be early adopters of it,
Sure.
but I think it's going to take, the time that it takes humans to adjust to everything, because humans are creatures of habit. That's why technology is always fear-based.
Yeah.
AI is always, especially in education, everyone's afraid of the new tech coming
Yeah.
out. We're creatures of habit. We like our comfort zone. Humans just, we have the humans like Elon Musk
Right.
who love change and who, oh my gosh, are changing the world. But majority are scared. And it's kind of how do we get over that mountain? So
I agree. And what's interesting with AI, and we talk generation, like the generational, if you want to call it generational gap or whatever it is,
Mhm.
usually technology is really, there is a fear when you talk about
Mhm.
generations are like, the older generation is like, no, I don't want it. And the younger
Mhm.
generation is always, yeah, I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to AI, it's a little different because the younger generation, in some ways, they're really skeptical nowadays. They're really
Mhm.
scared of everything. They don't trust anything. They don't trust the government, maybe rightfully so, but they don't trust
Yeah.
anything. And then the older generation is like, no, I'm not ready for that either. And so AI is interesting because I think there's this fear that spans across like all generations. When I did my first avatar video where it was my AI, it wasn't me. And
Mhm.
so I created an AI avatar
Yeah.
and put it on. I sent it to my daughter. She's 23 and she's like, that is like freaky. Like she's like,
Yeah.
that's horrible. She
Yeah.
wasn't even like, hey, that's cool. She's like, that is terrifying.
Yeah. There's real, and I think it also comes into play with pop culture and sci-fi, and it's always we always see I mean one of my favorite movies is The Terminator. We always see technology as detrimental to society.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just kind of the like the unconscious bias of
Right.
technology. It's not, we first don't think of a new technology as, oh my gosh, this is going to help us. We are like, oh my gosh, it's going to take over. Oh my
Yep.
gosh, it's going to ruin my job. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I think that's just ingrained in us,
Yeah.
as humans, just from movies and stories and War of the Worlds, and we
Yep.
have UFOs, and like, oh my gosh, they have this technology that we're being watched. Privacy concerns come into
Yep.
play with the current situation. So really it's fighting that bias off that I think is a little bit in all of us as a society.
Yep. And
So
hopefully we get some, and we do. We have good adopters. I think humanity has always
mhm,
shown that there's going to be a group of people who are going to use technology to better
mhm.
humanity. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, no matter what, there's going to be groups of people who are going to use technology to hurt humanity,
Yes.
and that's just the way it is. And it'll be the same with AI. There's
Yeah.
definitely going to be a lot of things that are going to come out. I think we're a drop in the bucket right now compared to what it's
Yeah.
going to be, and there's going to be some amazing things that are going to come out that are going to help us. I'm scared, and not scared, but I have that realistic fear that there are going to be some things that are going to be aha moments for us that are going to be horrible, and
Yeah.
the AI is going to be used for that. So,
Yeah.
but that's you look at the fear we've had, and we think it's just something we have now. But if I look at my parents and my grandparents, everyone, but we just live in fear.
Yeah. The and I think what's happening is, and I think what's adding to that fear is just technology is just exponentially growing faster and faster and faster. Whereas, you had the horse and buggy, then you had the car,
Yeah.
then you had, the we had flight, and then usually war took us to embracing other
Right.
things. And then you had the 1950s where creativity, and again, I mentioned the sci-fi and all these possibilities with technology came about. And then you had the 70s where it was kind of like, like I'm good with my book and I have my
Right.
typewriter and whatever. And then the 80s boom where like computers came out and cell phones came out. And there's kind of just there's certain events that trigger, technology adoption. And then there's
Yeah.
certain events that hinder it,
Yep.
and make you scared. So,
Yeah.
I
And
think it's one of those things.
I think that offsetting too with the like the good and the bad. And I think about a cell phone. Well, now I'm connected 100% of the time, but also
Yeah.
now I'm connected 100% of the time. Both of those are good and bad
Mhm.
statements because
Mhm.
now I can get a hold of my family, or when my kids were younger, I could get a hold of them quickly. And you think about social media and the damage that it is causing a lot of,
Yeah.
especially you look at teenage girls and boys and the expectations and damage it's causing. But
Mhm.
then if you do look at, we talked about the boomer generation that's really still using that, and I still use it, but only use, well, let's say Facebook. I only use Facebook to keep track of pictures of my nieces and nephews,
Yeah.
the ones in Australia and the ones that are far away. And so there's this good with it. And then there's there's just this bad. And you can say, like I said, that's the same statement that you make is both good and bad. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
There and there it's good and bad and everything. And like you said, there's going to be groups and people that use it to hurt or harm.
Yep.
And then there's going to be those ethical groups and those groups that want it to help society, and it's going to change. And honestly, I think it's going to be cyclical. It's
Yeah.
all in a cycle. We've been here before. I mean, people are like, "Oh, this is ruining everything." Well, look
Right.
at when computers came out. This is ruining everything. When cell phones came out, this is ruining everything. It's, the negatives always, I think, a little bit easier to nudge to. Again,
Sure.
that fear. But look at COVID, how everything changed.
Yeah.
And I think some things changed for the better. I think technology allowed all of us to reevaluate what was important
Hmm.
in our lives, our families, our kids, time for ourselves. I think COVID in a sense was like a reset button. Like,
For sure.
like a wake up button for humans, like wake up. You're kind of going on day to day, droning and just being like a robot. Like wake up. This is what's important, and change what you're doing every day.
Yeah.
So, again, like events that happen can trigger positive reaction and embracing of technology. Now everyone uses Zoom. I mean, look at what we're doing right now. We'd never
Right.
have online education if it weren't for the internet. We wouldn't be talking right now.
Sure.
So I think that, there is more good. There is more good than bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we're in a exciting, for me, it's exciting times
Hmm.
for me. I think it's going to be interesting, especially because we're so early into a technology that's
Yeah.
already doing some amazing things.
Hmm.
And
Right.
so it's going to get it's going to get even better. And I guess in some ways we'll see what else happens. But Shannon, thank you. Any last thoughts like on AI or anything, like any last thoughts?
Just get ready, because I mean, 30 years ago we were in, oh my gosh, it's terrible, it's the 90s, and I still think like 10 years ago was like the 90s. I don't know why. But
So why?
what we had then compared to in 30 years, what we're going to have is going to be incredible.
Incredible.
So it's exciting. I think it's an exciting time, especially for what you do and what I do.
Mm.
The people that, might be just afraid of everything, I'm sorry they have that view. But I think for the most part, technology, everything is to make human life better.
Absolutely. Well, buckle up for sure.
Yeah.
Shannon, thank you again for joining me. Thank you again as from a student to a teacher. Thank you for the work you did with that. That was amazing and I much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben. I appreciate that.